Wanted to introduce everybody to Dr. Chris Frueh. Chris is joining us today for a short notice session. He's the author of the book Operator Syndrome, and you've been doing research on impacts to special operators since 1991 as your focus, and that's
Let me
really encapsulated in your book. And
let
that's
me
what
correct that. Yeah, let me correct
what's
that just a little bit, Fred. I started working in the VA system in 1991 as a clinical psychologist, and I worked in VA in a PTSD clinic until 2006. And then after I left, and that was full-time clinical for 7 years, then part-time clinical, full-time research for another 8 years. And then the last 12, 13 years, I've been working with operators. Um, and not really, I mean, yeah, now there's some research that's happening, but I've mostly been doing, I don't know, one-on-one coaching with guys. And now I do quite a bit of consulting to some of the foundations that are out there. And I help the SEAL Future Foundation build their health program, which is running which is running really well. They've treated, I think, a third of all the SEALs in the world in the last 5 years. Um, I'm a clinical psychologist. I have an academic background, hundreds of papers. I was research director of Menninger Clinic in Houston for about a decade. I'm currently teaching at the University of Hawaii, the branch campus in Hilo. And the last 12, 13 years, I've been working, my private work, my private activities are almost entirely with special operators, mostly US, but also Canada and Britain and a few other countries. And I do a little bit of contract work for a few organizations that get State Department contracts. I'm not only sitting at home on my couch. Uh, but I'm honored to be here, and we're a small group, and so we can be really informal. As you guys have questions along the way, please feel free to ask them. Uh, and since I can't see everybody's little tile, you may have to make a little noise if you have a question, but please, questions would be welcome. Well, let's start with bottom line up front. Uh, you guys know this. A career in military special operation. Oh, by the way, let me say this. The presentation I'm giving is not an academic presentation. I don't really give academic presentations on this topic very often, maybe even never. So this is a slide deck I made for you guys. And I've given variations of this talk in many places around the world. Uh, it also resonates for police and firefighters. So that's another group that we're starting to try to think about. And so maybe even before the bottom line is up front is I want you guys to think of a spectrum, a continuum, and desk jockey nerds are at one end of the spectrum, and special operators and force recon and combat, many combatants, paramilitary, private defense contractors are at the other end of extremity. And then somewhere in there are police and fire also down at that end, and everybody who comes from combat arms. Um, a lot of what we're going to be talking about comes from training alone. So it isn't just combat deployments. This is something too many civilians don't understand. I'm giving a deposition in a lawsuit in a couple of weeks. And I've already read the psychologist who for the opposing counsel who did an evaluation. And I love the Israeli flag. Uh, Nice to see that right next to the American flag. Um, the and now I just forgot what I was about to say.
You were
Um,
saying you were giving a deposition, Chris, and you'd already read the
yeah,
psychologist.
thank you. The other psychologist and the guy, the plaintiff is an operator, former operator, and in so I wrote the first report. The psychologist that did the second report is critiquing my report, saying there's no way this guy has traumatic brain injury because there's no record he was ever rendered unconscious from an explosion, period. So I'm looking forward to the deposition where I get to educate the court. a little bit, and this guy won't be there, so he's not going to get educated, but maybe some other people will. All these just horrible, gross misunderstandings of facts and reality out there. All right, so bottom line up front, as I promised, and then I broke my promise. Um, Career in military special operations, first responding, inevitably involves a massive dose of cumulative allostatic load. And that's probably a phrase I need to highlight and define, which I'll come back to. But the allostatic load is essentially the burden, all the things that come and land on our shoulders and affect all of the human physiological systems. So I'm not here to talk about a specific official operator syndrome as a medical diagnosis. Think of it as a framework to understand the constellation of interrelated injuries and impairments that are common in operators. And I don't use this, I use this framework both to help folks who are already injured, in their 40s and 50s, maybe after their career. So we can use it as, to think about treatments and strategies to help be more healthy and functional, but it's also a performance optimization approach. So I have used this with a variety of different units and many individuals to help them be better at their jobs and the kind of things that they're doing professionally. So there is a medical paper that we published in 2020. And this was kind of the first time that the term operator syndrome would have appeared in the medical literature. Probably a phrase I've been using for several years, so maybe in some old podcasts out there. Most of the people on here are either physiologists, psychiatrists, neurologists, or psychologists. Morgan Luttrell, of course, is a former Navy SEAL. At the time he collaborated with us on this, he was a doctoral student. He was working on a PhD in neuroscience at UT Dallas. That was before his congressional work. All right, so one more thing. You guys ought to read this paper. You really should. You can find it on the internet. Just Google Operator Syndrome Medical Paper 2020. It'll come right up. It's a easy to read paper because it doesn't have a lot of jargon, and it's really a descriptive paper. So there's nothing in there that really any literate person would struggle to understand. That was by design. We wanted this to be something we could share with non-medical people. We wanted this to be something that operators and spouses could see and read.
Well, I'll find the link. I'll find a link and distribute it to everybody on the call. Also,
Okay.
guys, for everybody attending the call, this is I got the, the whatever, the predator camouflage on here. But if you need a copy of the book, if you don't have one, if you email or text me, I'll need your address. We'll get you one sent to you. Okay, we'll buy one for you and get it sent to you.
Cool. So let's define allostatic load. This is a hypothetical term, a hypothetical concept. And it was kind of first, I think, talked about it, 30 some years ago, 35 years ago. And I'll just kind of read the quote very quickly. It's the strain on the body produced by repeated ups and downs of physiological responses, as well as by elevated activity of physiological systems under challenge, and the changes in metabolism and the impact of wear and tear on a number of organs and tissues that can be predisposed to disease. So, a highly hypothetical concept, but what it means is we're trying to say that all of the stressors, and that could be everything, that could be blast exposures, that could be rucking, that could be sleep deprivation, it could be your divorce, it could be everything that you're managing, and go back and think about the high operational tempos and all the physicality of the work. Well, this affects not just the mind and the things that we think of as being psychological, but the nervous system, the neuroendocrine system, the immune system, metabolic, musculoskeletal, respiratory, perceptual, cardiovascular systems. All of these things are interconnected. So a blast, you do breaching or demolitions or shoulder-fired rockets. All of these things have an effect on all of these physiological systems. And unfortunately, traditional medicine separates them. And so if you have metabolic concerns, you go to that specialty. If you have hormone concerns, and if you're lucky, then you might get to see an endocrinologist. But they're not necessarily talking to each other. And nobody's thinking about all of this, intertwined into one great big system. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here with this framework. And of course, it's not just the physiological systems, it's the cascade effects on all the social systems. Whatever social systems are relevant to you. If you're active, it might be your unit, your command. If you're married or partnered, it's that relationship, it's parenting and family, it's occupation, it's special, so societal, and all kinds of other things that are going to be affected. And it's cumulative. And it's very high for you guys. And I'll kind of talk about that in just a moment. But one of the things that we want to point out is if you have an 8-year career in the military, or a 10 or a 15 or a 25 or whatever, over time it's building. These things add up, they accumulate. Now, if you got proper rest and recovery breaks, if you got a full, 2-month vacation every year where you got to dip your toes in the sand and not have to think about anything or do anything, that would probably help mitigate. But of course, that doesn't happen in a military career. All right. So what are some of the factors that I and my colleagues look at? And I put blast exposures at the top of the list for a reason. Um, this is something that operators have a lot of exposures to. Civilians, including medical provider civilians, don't understand this. They have no concept of it. In medical sciences, we barely understand it. 10 years ago, in 2016, was the first paper that was published with humans, albeit dead humans, that looked at the effects of blast exposures. And it was a single case series design study by a well-regarded pathologist at Walter Reed and his team, Daniel Pearl. He's a neurologist and a pathologist. And what they found they collected about 20 or 30 brains of soldiers who had died, mostly by suicide, and had not damaged their head. So he got their brains. And he did the same kind of stuff that Bennett Amalu was doing with brains when he discovered chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Bennett Amalu was actually taking brains home from the path lab, like football players and boxers and people who had a lot of impact forces. And he was, making very thin histological slices of the brain, staining them and looking at them under a microscope. And what he found were a pattern of tau protein buildups, TAU, tau. Pearl and his team did that, and they didn't find the tau protein buildups. They kept looking, they used different stains, they took different approaches. And what they did end up finding is a pattern of scarring in the glial cells of the nervous system caused by blast exposures. So the glial cells, sorry, I'm going to nerd out on you guys here for just a minute, and I'm
We love it.
it'll be okay.
Yeah, we geek out all the time on these. So.
Okay, good. The glial cells are the support cells in the nervous system. The neurons are the messenger cells. The glial cells hold them in place, insulate them, clean them, take out the toxins, scaffold them. So they're very important. And each neuron has approximately 10 glial cells. So what do we have? 100 billion neurons. So we have a trillion glial cells, roughly speaking. Those get scarred. The glial cells get scarred by blasts. And so now we even have a name for this. They called it at the time interface astroglial scarring. It sounds like a science fiction term to me.
Can that be reversed, Chris?
Probably not. If it can be, we don't know it. But think about a scar on your arm or your body. We don't easily eliminate any kind of scarring. So I guess there's maybe surgical things that could be done on a skin scar on the skin, but I don't think we don't know of any. anything at the moment that will reverse that or undo it. So blast exposures are something that operators have at a magnitude of order of, I don't know, 10, 100, compared to even most other soldiers in combat arms. Your average Army infantryman does not get a whole lot of training with demolitions and breaching and blasts. So it's a magnitude difference. Plus all the rifles, the 50 cals, the rockets, grenades. Then you add on to that, well, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Um, Blast exposures, impact forces, so that is being hit on the head. So the concussions, subconcussions are there. The op tempo, just constantly go, 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 go. This is another thing civilians don't understand. If 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 we took a look at somebody who goes through a training pipeline, um, by the time they get to their first combat deployment, they're already affected just from the training alone. So probably if you look at operators and many Marine units, um, you probably have somewhere between 80 and 95% mild traumatic brain injuries already just from the training alone before anybody is deployed. So high op tempo and the chronic stress of that means chronic elevations of stress hormones. This is an invisible thing that happens in our body. But think about a vehicle. Think about a sports car that's redlined constantly. Redlining that vehicle is going to wear out the engine. Same thing with our bodies. Always being that heightened level of stress and high op tempo and hypervigilance. Combine that with sleep deprivation, you are creating a hormonal storm in your body that will persist for years. And we'll talk about hormones here in just a moment. Sleep deprivation, circadian disruption of night work, traveling to the other side of the world, crossing time zones, toxic exposures, all the physical stuff that has to be done in training as well as in deployments, the rucking, the diving, rappelling, tactical driving, not even combatives, especially combatives. How many blows to the head do you take in combatives? How many times have you been choked out in combatives? Tiny little things that can add up over time. The training is high intensity. A lot of operators, a lot of guys I've known over the years report many orthopedic injuries. And I don't know anybody, and please raise your hand if you're different from what I'm about to say, but I don't know anybody who doesn't have chronic pain in their joints and even just lives with it like it's just normal. Shoulders, knees, hips, ankles, elbows, neck, back. Please raise your hand if you don't have any chronic pain in those areas. Yeah, I didn't think so. And then there's psychological stuff going on, time away from home, all the missed milestones with family and children. A lot of guys miss the first soccer game, the first concert, the school programs, maybe even the birth of a child, holidays, all kinds, wedding anniversaries. Length of career. Most people don't seem to understand this. Most civilians don't seem to understand this, but guys don't go into special operations. Guys don't go into elite military units like Force Recon, thinking that they're only going to be there for 2 years and then they'll retire, and then they'll leave and go back to civilian life. Well, most civilians think of a military service as being like a 4-year enlistment. I don't know anybody from special operators in special operations with a 4-year career, which means if you have a 20-year career or a 15 or a 10 or a 30, whatever, it's a longer career. So not only is the career more intense, but it's longer. I saw something this week that just didn't surprise me, but it did churn my stomach. And it was a conversation happening at the VA. I'm not part of the VA, but I was tuned in. Somebody kind of shared with me what's being said. And there was a discussion within the PTSD leadership of the VA, and somebody brought up the concept of operator syndrome, and it was immediately dismissed, saying there's no evidence to believe that operators have any more allostatic load than any other soldier or trauma survivor of any sort. Like, oh my goodness, such ignorance, and such willful ignorance, probably. You guys have seen a lot of violence and death. You've lost teammates, and it's a never quit culture. So, so as we get into this side of things, the domains, chronic pain is not a reason to quit. Uh, Hormonal dysfunction. You may even know that you have hormonal problems, but you don't tap out because you got to keep going. And so that never quit culture is part of what um, leads to more cumulative allostatic load, because you don't take a knee when you need to. I have a friend who was telling me just last week, he was talking about he completed Ranger school. I think he basically shattered his knee in the first week, and he pushed all the way through and completed it because he wasn't going to go home. And afterwards, he went to a doc, and the doctor was like, "Oh my gosh, you can't walk on this thing." And he's like, "Well, I've been running, I've been rucking, I just completed Ranger school." And the doc was just like, in disbelief. Um, if I had been that doc, I wouldn't have been in disbelief because I see it. All right. So, what is operator syndrome? It's a collection of these domains. And remember, each of these domains brings symptoms and suffering potentially, and each of them brings impairments. So it's both a subjective suffering as well as a functional impairment to some important area of your life. And also, to repeat this, these are all interrelated. They're not in isolation from each other. So we start with traumatic brain injury. In my view, every single operator has traumatic brain injury. And we could talk about, is it high or low, but it's there, caused by blast exposures alone. Sleep disturbance, such as insomnia, is probably near 100%. Sleep apnea is really, really high. When I first met the first operators I started talking to years ago, one of the things well, I had three surprises. So I'll share my three surprises. So I'm a psychologist. I come from a background of working clinically in a PTSD clinic. A lot of my research has been with PTSD. So of course, I'm sitting there with these guys thinking they must have PTSD. They're all telling me the same thing. Um, In fact, let me say a little bit more about the context of this. So I made friends with a group of guys in Houston, Texas, all those years ago. There was a local group, club formed by operators across all different branches. And they got together and they had a networking event, a happy hour kind of thing, maybe twice a month. I got invited. I started going, and one by one, these guys started kind of having private conversations with me. I assumed that PTSD was going to be a major problem. What I was hearing and what guys were telling me was essentially this: Doc, I'm not doing well. I don't feel like my old self. I can't function like I used to function, but I don't know why. I can't put my finger on what's off. Yeah, I don't sleep very well. Yeah, I'm probably drinking too much. Yeah, my relationships, my marriage, my relationships with my kids, not great. But what's going on? I don't know. So my immediate assumption is, well, of course, it's post-traumatic stress disorder, right? That's what it's supposed to be. That's our easy button all these decades. No, my first surprise was PTSD was not the problem. Not saying there aren't symptoms of PTSD, and not saying that nobody in the group. I'm not saying there wasn't anybody who had PTSD, but it wasn't driving the problems. Started getting sleep studies, and I was shocked to learn that every single one of the guys I knew, five or six guys, they had sleep apnea. Today, I would go out on, I don't have a specific number because we haven't actually studied this, but I'd say it's about 80 to 90% have sleep apnea, which is
Chris,
shocking.
do you think that's due to something in the allostatic load, either one, inflaming the tongue, or two, causing issues with like jaw placement, and or palate disruption that might close airways?
I I just don't know.
Mhm.
John, in fact, I'm trusting you know a whole lot more about this than I do, so maybe you will figure this out and let me know
Yeah.
at some point. I don't know,
I,
and I don't think anybody knows.
there have been some studies with people in high stress environments tend to have higher levels of GERD. And Chris,
Yeah,
I can't, it's been a long time
yeah,
since I've read
yeah.
this study, but I can't remember if it's leptin or ghrelin in the stomach acid coming
Hmm.
up in the GERD, and it actually causes the tongue to swell. In some cases, if I remember the number, I think it was 60% larger, I think.
Okay.
And so, yeah, anyway, I'll see if I can locate some of that and send it to
Okay.
you. It was interesting read. So like basically stress causes a hormone response in gastric fluid that causes sleep apnea because the tongue inflames and you don't even notice it. But
Hmm.
the mouth is no longer big enough to hold the tongue essentially.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so that's what aggravates it. Anyway, I don't want to sidetrack.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot, and I never have a good answer for it. The third surprise for me was everybody had low testosterone. Now, a common thing in psychiatry, you'd think we would look at hormones, but we don't. In psychiatry and psychology, we don't think about hormones. We focus on the psychological symptoms and the impairments, but we don't go very deep. And so one of the things that we've seen is the rate of low testosterone in operators is super high. There are psychological problems. Depression, anger are probably the two biggies. Depression, anger, and anxiety, just general anxiety are common. Hypervigilance, vigilance is a survival mechanism, and you have to be vigilant when you're in a uniform doing the things you guys do. Um, Substance abuse, alcohol is common. Seems like a lot of impairments to hearing, vision, balance. All of the perceptual systems are affected. Chronic pain, we talked about this in the joints. Headaches, that could be a TBI thing. Headaches, migraines are common. And of course, all of everything that's on the left hand column here is going to all of that loads into cognitive impairments, to concentration, memory, learning new things. And that's one reason why the transition is difficult, so difficult for so many, is because learning new skill sets, learning new knowledge is much harder with the TBI. You can coast on muscle memory for a lot of things if you're already an expert before the cognitive impairments. You can keep going, but to learn entirely new things is difficult. Cardiometabolic dysfunction. We didn't
Can
have
I
this.
ask you a question on that real quick?
Sure, sure.
Um, the cognitive impairment. I mean, there's, I don't know if, like you said, muscle memory, and it just triggered something else. I don't know how to explain it. There are times when I'm like driving or um, doing something that's routine, like parking and walking into work, where I completely lose track of space and time. Like I like it just goes blank, right? Like there's been days where I'll show up at the gate of the base that I work at, and I'll be like, how the fuck did I get here? I completely forgot part of that drive. There's been other days really where I have to badge in to work still, and I don't even remember badging in. I'm like standing at my desk, and I'm like, what the hell? Like it just comes back to me that I just had gone through this entire process and I completely spaced. And I find that's And it happens a lot with things that I do frequently. I mean, it's almost like my brain is just shutting down like awareness of routine tasks. I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but anyways,
We all can do that up to a point. Like driving somewhere to work that's very familiar to you. A lot of us, most humans will daydream, we'll be thinking about things, and then we get to work and we don't really have a clear memory. Did I pass the post office? I don't remember passing the post office. You're saying what you're describing sounds like a little more extreme version of what is otherwise somewhat common, is otherwise pretty common. Do you feel unnerved when you get to your desk? Is it unnerving to realize you don't remember the last 20 minutes or half hour?
yeah, at times, yeah. I mean, there's times when that happens where I'm like, holy crap, man, what's going on? Like why would I not remember something as important as driving or walking into the building? That you know what I mean? Like it's that can be unnerving.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's no doubt everything. Anxiety interferes with cognition. Obviously, sleep, insomnia, sleep deprivation interferes with cognitive impairments. Traumatic brain injury interferes with concentration and memory. Chronic pain does. It's hard to concentrate when you're hurting. We see significant effects of cardiometabolic dysfunction. This was not something in our original paper. This is something that we're adding, and it's not in my book either. This is something that we're realizing we need to include. We need to add. It's especially notable in first responders. I think operators are less likely to become overweight because there's such a high degree of discipline and focus on PT and maintaining a dangerous posture. Police and fire that are maybe don't have quite as much of that ethos. You walk into a room full of police officers or fire chiefs, and there's a lot of, you just look around the room and you can see the unhealthiness of the cardiometabolic systems in the room. A lot of folks with marital and family concerns, intimacy concerns. Yes, sexual intimacy, erectile dysfunction are very common. We initially at the SEAL Future Foundation, we weren't gonna, they didn't want the guy, and it's run by SEALs. I'm just an advisor. They thought it would not be a good idea to ask about erectile dysfunction because they didn't want to embarrass anybody and they didn't think it would be a common enough problem. Once they did start asking, they found it's almost universal. Now, I mean, I granted we could make a insert SEAL joke here. But it's very common in operators. And we found that when they asked about it, the guys were relieved. They were relieved to be asked about erectile dysfunction because they were living with it in a kind of a sense of silent shame, not realizing that every other team guy had the problem. And so every other operator out there, even non-Navy, I'm sure this is a real issue. Of course, it's related to hormone dysfunction, but it's also related to all these other things. Not only sexual intimacy, though, emotional intimacy. How many of you have been told you're not empathic? How many of you have been told by your wife or a family member or somebody who knows you for a long time that you've changed? You're less patient, you're not as kind, you're not as sensitive, and you've turned into kind of an asshole.
I'm not even a special operator, but I'm told that all the time.
Well, I mean, some people are just assholes without being. It's a problem, and guess what? It's a normal thing. Your threshold for empathy has been reset to be at a very different place than the typical civilian's level for empathy. I find it. Yesterday I had a student show up. He's missed class for a month. He didn't turn his paper in. And he shows up with the excuse that his grandmother died and he's been in mourning. And all his other teachers have given him extensions and things. And I just said to him flat out, I'm sorry, you're going to fail this class. You've missed a month of class and you missed the deadline. You're 8 days past the deadline. There's no way I can pass you. And I'm sorry about your grandmother. And I'm sorry, that's too bad. But guess what? That's not an excuse to take a month off. Uh, and he was like jolted. Well, all my other professors understood. We talked about it for a while longer. And this morning he sent me an email and said, thank you. You really opened my eyes. And he took responsibility and accountability for it. But I don't have that softness anymore. I'm not saying I ever did, but my threshold for what I consider to be stressful and hard is a lot different from what most of my peers consider to be. So I myself am viewed as being kind of a non-empathic professor by a lot of my own colleagues.
Hey, Chris, this is Steve Morgan. Can I jump in here with a question?
Please.
I'm trying to save them to the end, but I might forget it. When I came back from the war, what I got from my family and close associates was, you're not the fucking asshole you used to be. The war did you some good.
Oh,
Personality. So that's kind of the flip side about. I never gave it too much consideration, but now that you're bringing it up on the other side, yeah, what's that about?
I don't know. I don't know your family. I didn't know you beforehand. Humans have an enormous amount of individual variability. So what is true for 80% of people may not be the case for the other 20 or 10%.
So I'm a nice guy now.
That's good. Maybe you learned some lessons that made you nice. Was it a treatment, anything?
I beg your pardon?
Did you have any particular type of treatment that led to that?
No, when I got back, it was like, I guess, it was ugly while I was there. Maybe I was just happy to be back. It was like, hey, you missed, and you missed a lot. So
Yeah.
I win.
Spirit of gratitude or something in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something. Yeah, without giving it a lot of thought.
Hey, it's really important to remember, I'm talking in generalities here today. Not every single, not every operator has everything on this list.
Yeah. So the bottom line really is, I guess what I think I'm hearing you say is, it changes you, whether for the good or the bad. It's normal to get changed.
Oh, for sure. Oh,
Okay. Yeah, got it.
oh.
Perfect.
And that's what makes transitions so hard. That's part of what makes transitions so hard. I mean, everything that loads into leaving the service. I mean, transitions are hard for humans, period. They really are. In fact, part of the stress literature has been about quantifying the amount of stress that different life experiences cause people. Divorce is pretty high on that list. Losing a job, financial challenges are pretty high on that list. But even things like taking a vacation are known to be stressful for people just because they're a little bit of a transition. So think about the way I often talk about transition out of a military. I know you have transitions within the military. You PCS, you come back home from a deployment. I'm not saying any of those. I mean, those are all transitions as well. But at the end of a career and you leave, you're leaving behind a tribe. You're leaving behind the mission and purpose that you've had that's been so important of who you are and who you've become. And then you step foot into this new society, this new culture that doesn't understand what you've been doing, doesn't understand who you may be. They don't understand the mission and the purpose that you've had. And so finding a new tribe, finding a new mission and purpose is really difficult for a lot of guys. And then when you try to do that at the same time that you're trying to struggle with all of these things on this list, including, the challenge of learning new things, the transition is really a difficult thing. I think of it as a 2 to 5 year process, if you have time for it. I had a phone call out a week ago today with a really good friend, a young man who I've been quietly knowing and helping for about 5 years now, and he just retired the week before. Medically retired, Navy SEAL development group. He's just leaving his squadron there, and he's completing a master's degree. He's got a part-time job. Like he's all set up for success. And yet he said he just spent like 10 days just sitting around his house, sort of trying to figure out what just happened. And he's a strong young guy and he's going to be fine. He's got good stuff and he's going to do them. But what do you do with that moment? How do you celebrate that moment? One thing I've noticed is I've probably in the last 12 years, I've probably been to 5 retirement ceremonies, total. Most of the guys I've known who retired didn't have a ceremony. They didn't want to. They just wanted to. My friend Johnny on last Saturday, he said, yeah, at the end of the day, my last day, he went home and he opened a very special bottle of whiskey, aged whiskey that he'd been holding on to for several years. And he and his wife each just had a shot, just sipped it a little bit. That was it. Nothing with his teammates, nothing. How many of you guys had retirement ceremonies? Yeah. Okay. One. So what's that all about? Part of it is in what Johnny's talked, I mean, we've been talking about this for the last years. He was med boarded out. So serious injuries to his neck and back, can't operate anymore, put on medical restrictions, et cetera, et cetera. And he's still on good terms with his squadron, he and his platoon mates. But he said it was like almost like a switch got flipped. He was no longer relevant. Nobody's mad at him. Nobody's hating on him. Nobody's ostracizing him. But he can just feel like he just, in that moment, became invisible. They all have an important, dangerous jobs going forward. They love him, but he's no longer part of it. So no, there's no time to really think about him or attend to him. And he just went home, and that's very common. A lot of guys med boarded out, issues with commands. A lot of guys end up kind of moving from their last duty station to something else, and it's not a very happy switch. So the end of career is often an unpleasant time itself. Toxic exposures, heavy metals, smoke, inhalation, oxygen deprivation for divers, radiologicals maybe, biologicals maybe. What are all the things, the gear and the equipment? What's in the uniforms that you're wearing in the desert? What kind of flame retardant chemicals are just now melting into your skin? You've got burn pits, you've got other kinds of things. I know guys that were passed through a place called K2 up in Uzbekistan. I've heard independent descriptions of this place that has green ponds. It used to be some kind of Soviet something involving nuclear stuff. Who knows what's in that stuff? And then we have existential concerns. Nobody can tell you what your existential concerns are. I sure can't. The VA will tell you you have moral injury, and they'll give you a list of all the things you should be ashamed of. Thank you very much for that. I don't think it's that simple, and I don't think it's that judgmental. Can't be that judgmental. But here are some of the things that I hear all the time. One starts with childhood. A lot of operators, a lot of soldiers, a lot of first responders had rough childhoods. And it might be adversity, it might be emotional neglect, it might be absent parenting, or it might be homelessness, physical, sexual abuse. We've seen a lot of sexual abuse in operators. Most civilians assume that an important, meaningful existential concern is the horror of killing. and that's certainly a real issue for many. So is the thrill of killing. And this is something that I long ago learned to ask guys about and to talk to them about because most won't. I hear it fairly often. Guy will, when I ask, they'll say, "You're the first person to ever ask me about this, but yes, I miss it. I loved it at the time. I miss it now. If I could go back and do it again, I would. Um, I wish do you regret killing? I wish I'd killed more. I wish I'd killed more of the bad guys." I hear that a lot. I've had guys describe to me that to survive an encounter when the enemy didn't is an exhilarating experience. Also heard guys describe hand to hand. One guy I know described how he actually loved to kill an enemy with a hatchet or a metal pipe or anything, and even just the feel of having the guy's blood and guts and brain parts splattered on him, that there was just something thrilling about that. Hemingway wrote about this. Ernest Hemingway wrote a story in 1936, and I think it came from his own war experiences in the Spanish Civil War. He talked about, and I don't have the quote memorized, but he said something to the effect of, once a man has learned to hunt other men and like it, he can never feel excited or deeply meaningful with anything else. Nothing else, everything else pales in comparison. You can see the list. Guilt is often there. Certainly loss and grief are common. One of the things I see a lot is guys who are active duty don't have time to grieve, don't have time. There's a ramp ceremony and then it's back to work. It's later. And sometimes it's all the way after retirement or leaving the service where there's more time to reflect, more silence around you, that then those names, those faces, those moments start to come back in ways that really weren't expected. So there's oftentimes a lot of grief at the end of a career. I've already talked about most of this. Okay. This is a snazzy little diagram we have in our paper. I'm sure you can't really see it here. It doesn't really matter, but it is in the medical paper. All right. So operator syndrome doesn't inevitably lead to suicide, but I don't know very many guys who haven't been suicidal. I think it's probably a universal experience to be thinking about that Glock. A lot of guys talk about having that Glock in their mouth. I know there has been a lot of actual completed suicides. I get read in on them when they happen in the SEAL community because of my work with the health program at SEAL Future Foundation. And it's about one a month, one or two a month. It used to be more than that. Oh, and this is a quote. One of the things that I did in the book, if you do pick up my book and look through, you'll see it's written by me, but every chapter, there's 2 or 3 quotes from guys or gals I know and have worked with. And this was so I try to use real world examples and perspectives. This, and most of them, the guys will tell me, like I put their name in there. Like I've got a quote from Tom Satterley. I've got a quote from Eddie Gallagher. I think I got a quote from Eddie Gallagher. Maybe not Eddie. This guy gave me, this is something a guy said in a conversation. I said, could I use that in my book? And he didn't want me to use his name. But this is an example of something I hear all the time. I've had 7 buddies eat a bullet after coming home. Sometimes it's 9, sometimes it's 12. A couple years ago, I did the Black Rifle Coffee podcast, and I did it with David Rutherford, who's a former SEAL who wrote the foreword for the book. And so Evan Hafer, I think he was a Green Beret. And so he's Black Rifle Coffee. He did the interview, and Dave pulled out a list in the middle of the interview. He pulled out a list of like 15 names of friends of his who have died by suicide. And he read their names out loud for the show. That's That's the prevalence of it.
That sucks.
Big time. This is another quote from the book. And this is Clay Jensen. He gave his name, former seventh group, former OGA contractor. And here's his quote, and this is at the front end of my book. Every time I see a new primary care doc, VA or civilian, they are completely overwhelmed by the sheer number and severity of the different medical issues I have. Nobody knows how to treat me. I'm completely different from any other patient they've had. For over 10 years, I struggled to understand why I am the way I am and to know what was really going on with me. Then I came across an article on operator syndrome and was like, holy shit, I'm normal. I went from feeling totally alone to being part of the tribe again. To me, that's just a really powerful quote. But I'll also say this, I get a version of this quite frequently. I've given workshops to large groups, first responders. I did one last year in Arkansas. It was a mixture of state police. It was actually sponsored by the New Orleans Drug Enforcement Agency office. So it was heavily DEA, there were a few FBI, but they invited their partners in Arkansas. So Arkansas State Police, SWAT, the Pulaski County Sheriff's Department, some of those folks were there. That's Hot Springs, which if you know your history from the 1880s to the 1930s, that was kind of a gangster hangout in kind of an exciting place, Pulaski County. I had probably I did a 3-hour workshop afterwards, probably 15 guys came up to me privately, shook my hand, said, wow, I just felt like you were talking about me as I was sitting there. I get that everywhere I go all the time.
Yeah, Chris, can I say something real quick? First off, thanks for coming. I read your article a while back and then ended up getting your book. I think I heard you on a podcast with Preston Klein a while back one time. Maybe y'all shared a podcast
I think we did
together.
for
Yeah, I think that may have been the one. And I'd have to say that as soon as I read that, same thing. It was like, holy shit, man. And the frustrating thing for me was I went through Intrepid Spirit right before I retired, the TBI clinic on Camp Lejeune, and they were doing all the things that you were talking about. I had different folks that then they would all come together round table, talk about me and deal with those things. So, because I had a testosterone level at like 91 at one point, they found out. And so they hooked me up with all these different protocols. And I was starting to feel better right before I got out. And then, of course, I transitioned to the VA. And what did they do? They shut everything down that Intrepid Spirit had just hooked up with me. And then next thing you know, I'm on like 13 different pills for varying things. But the problem, like you said, too, was when I first went into the VA to get seen and started telling them everything, they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. We can only do like one thing at a time. Like you got too much stuff going on. And so that just prolonged. And then you know how long it takes to get your next appointment.
Yep.
And so by the time I was finally able to like tell them everything that was going on, I was already on a number, like a cocktail of things, which I ultimately finally just quit cold turkey. And once I found the psychedelic route, that has helped me. But yeah, to your point, reading your article, reading the book was finally like, God bless. I wish this book had come out like 6 years prior, and I'd probably be in a lot better shape. But yeah, thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks for sharing that.
Can I echo that too, Cody? That's almost exactly the same thing happened to me. And I'm sure you hear this all the time about guys dealing with the VA. I actually included your article in my initial package when I retired to the VA. This was back in 2019, so I'm sure they just threw it away at the time. But yeah, same thing. It's like, I don't know what's up. Here's all the symptoms that I'm dealing with, and I got the cocktail, just like he was saying, and because that's the VA medicine for you. But I appreciate same exact sentiment. I read it and was like, I have all of this, So I appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. The VA doesn't like me and I have a long history with the VA because I was apparently a troublemaker in the early 2000s. I was published some studies showing how much malingering and faking, not just of symptoms, but of actual reported military history is going on in the VA. And we did a paper with the guy that wrote the book Stolen Valor and worked with the FBI to create the Stolen Valor Act, former Vietnam veteran himself. So after reading his book that was published in 1999, we replicated his methodology and he worked with us and as a co-author on the study. We showed the VA has a real problem. A lot of people go in saying they're veterans and they were combat veterans and they were this and they were that and all the combat exposure. We found only about a third we did a Freedom of Information Act request and we got their DD 214s. Only about a third had told us anything close to the truth. And yet the VA really tried to silence. They tried to block it from being published. I was threatened privately by the head of the National Centers for PTSD. He told me if I publish the study, it will be the end of my scientific career. And I told him to pound sand, and we published it anyway in a British Journal of
Good for
Psychiatry.
you. Good for
And,
you.
and then I left the VA because they didn't want to allow me to continue speaking or doing anything. That's happening again. They are trying to chill any research in the system related to operator syndrome. I know this for a fact because I know two people who have done research with with operator syndrome, and they've received the same kind of phone call that I received from a well-placed, leader who called to intimidate them, threaten them, and then offered them the carrot of, well, if you go along and you put this away, we've got a promotion for you. You come work for our center and we'll pay you more and we'll give you resources. So that's the way the VA works and has worked for as long as I've known it, which is now about 40 years. Oh, well, 35 years. The PTSD industry is a very real thing. They do not want to be disrupted, and they will go to extensive lengths to silence any new ideas. It's exactly what we saw with COVID. There was the scientific approved narrative, settled science, follow the science. Any MD, any doctor who came out with a different opinion was really piled on. That's the battle you guys face with the VA. It's not there to really adjust and do the right thing yet, at least. So let's talk. So healthcare systems are part of the problem here. And I'm in this slide, I don't really go after the VA, but I think we can all agree. What does happen everywhere, including the civilian side, is PTSD is now the easy button. If you're a veteran, you go to the VA, they hear you deployed overseas, boom, hit the button, you must have PTSD. Whatever problems you are describing, whatever symptoms, all of that gets loaded into this category. We don't need to check your hormones. We don't need to give you a sleep study. It's PTSD. We do have our blind spots in mental health care. We don't think about hormones. We don't think about sleep very well, certainly not sleep apnea. My own professional experience, I've been in 3 different psychiatry departments as faculty over the years at 3 different medical schools, large departments, 120, 150 faculty, multidisciplinary departments that have psychiatry, psychology, geneticists, internal medicine docs, neuroimagers, neuropsychologists. But what they've never had in any of my departments was anybody who was an expert in hormones. No andrologist, no endocrinologist, not even an internal medicine doc with any particular specialty in hormones. And I don't know any mental health people that did research in hormones. So it's a true, really serious blind spot. And what we know is if you have low testosterone, you're going to look like you're extremely depressed. You're going to look disinterested, apathetic, low motivation, low energy, fatigued, poor concentration, poor sleep, no sex drive, don't want to work out, lousy concentration. That's what low testosterone causes. You go to the VA with that, and they're immediately going to load you up on antidepressant medications. And then, like Cody said, next thing you know, there will be a cocktail of 12 to 15. different medications. We're also really fragmented in specialties. So one of the nice things about NICO and the Intrepid centers is they try not to be fragmented. They try to have all the different specialists come together and sit at the table. So everybody's talking together about the same patient. That doesn't happen anywhere else, not really. Even with the electronic medical record, doctors don't have time. They don't read the medical notes of other specialists. I mean, maybe if they see something, but all they really see is that list of problems that's published at the top of the list that lists all the diagnoses, including the diagnoses that are no longer relevant and haven't been for like 15 years. Other issues, we don't know much about TBI. We don't. We're just lacking the science. So this neuropsychologist spouting off about how a guy didn't have TBI because he wasn't blown up and rendered unconscious. There's a lot of people who think that way, clinicians who think that way, who aren't aware of the research and the science that's taken place over the last decade. But even the people who know the science, there's so much more we don't know. So I think we're at an early stage. You asked about, can we reverse the scarring in the glial cells? And I say, I don't know. I don't think we can, but maybe in 20 years, maybe in 30 years, maybe down the road.
It'd be really interesting with all the mitochondrial science that's coming out, particularly with AI, to see how that goes.
Yeah, I think AI is going to revolutionize our understanding of the human body and medical care.
Yeah,
Might even put MDs out of business.
see, it's interesting.
It is going to change practice. We'll see where it goes. Here's another issue. Well, where does a warrior go to get a therapist? I've never worn a uniform myself. I don't know very many social workers, psychiatrists, psychologists, master's level therapists, nurse practitioners. I just don't know very many who are veterans. There are some, but not many. A very common experience that a police officer or a operator has is going in for an appointment to see a psychologist. They've already been told they probably have PTSD. They go in, they talk, they start talking. The therapists often do one or both of two things. One is they often spout off with all these their own assumptions that may have no connection to your reality. The other is they may fold. They may become very distressed themselves. They may start crying, weeping, sobbing, shaking. I've heard that happen. I've heard of that happening pretty often. That's a common story that I hear from guys.
Be a
How do
bad seat to be in. Like, oh gosh, I'm screwed. Right.
Well, guys will go, I'm sorry I ruined your day. And they'll walk
Yeah.
out, come back.
Hey, everybody on the call here. So, part of Hooks of Hope, most of the people already know this on this call, who've already participated in our retreats, but we have a relationship with an organization called the SOF Network. It's sofnetwork.org. It was started by Dr. Chris Ostrander. And he built a network of, I don't know what the number is now. Last I checked, there were over 115 clinical counselors that specialize in SOF, are serving the SOF community. And so if you know someone who's struggling to get a resource, we can get them a resource. If they're struggling, if they don't have funding for it as well, we'll figure that out, even if it means so each one of our participants, we pay for 12 sessions free for you guys to go through counseling with one of these counselors. But you don't necessarily have to go through fishing, one of our fishing retreats, to be able to get that. If you know someone who's suffering, you want to help them.
Yeah, I'd say, even real quick, when I was before I was getting out of MARSOC even, and they sent me to a psychologist, and I went up there, and it was a 65-year-old lady who obviously had no clue or no experience of the same thing that I had gone through or whatever. So I said, hey, this isn't going to work. So what they do, they turn around and send me to a 73-year-old dude, again, with no prior service or anything. And I said, this ain't going to work. They sent me out in town, ended up with another older lady. I was just like, fuck me, man. I'm like,
Yeah.
this isn't working, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
I would say there are therapists out there who've never served who can be very good therapists, but they have, and I've never served, just to be clear. But you need somebody who maybe has read a little history, paid attention to the news, knows a veteran, has some friends who are veterans, or is just willing to be humble and curious and listen and learn. And we don't have, that's not how we train our therapists anymore. When I speak to groups of trainees, and I don't teach in a graduate program, but when I do, or when I get questions, I always say most important thing is forget everything you've learned about cultural competence from your textbooks, because that is something they teach. That's all textbook bullshit.
Yeah.
What you need to do is you need to sit and listen, and you need to be humble. Don't assume you know. You need to be humble, and you need to be curious. You need to actually be listening and learning. And maybe if you have a patient who's talking about an Iraq deployment to Mosul in 2017, maybe go learn about the Battle of Mosul at that time. Go learn about what was happening there. If you're working with somebody who was on a forward operating base as as something in Kandahar, go learn about it. Just do a little bit of simple homework. You don't have to read 1,000-page books to learn some stuff. So again, just to recap, operator syndrome, framework, performance, and treatment. And my implications are, and of course you can imagine my psychology colleagues really don't like to hear this, but biology and physiology needs to be forward. Depression, anger, PTSD are psychological problems, but even those have strong physiological drivers, such as sleep disturbance, such as sleep apnea, such as low testosterone. And we've erred in using PTSD as the easy button. It's almost like we created a bureaucratic stamp, rubber stamp that we just use over and over and over again. And once we stamp your file with PTSD, we've done our job, and now here's a bucket of medications. Good luck to you. And that's kind of as far as, sometimes, too often, that's as far as we go. Another implication is both treatment and lifestyle are really important. Treatments aren't going to help you if you're not also thinking about lifestyle approaches. And I'll say a few things about that. In fact, I'll talk about that now. So when we think about lifestyle, what do you guys need to be doing? I boil it down to two things: sleep and anti-inflammation. And if you do everything to improve your sleep and to reduce your inflammation in your body, you're going to be really far ahead of the game. If you haven't had a sleep study, get a sleep study. By the way, the other low-hanging fruit, if you've never had your hormones checked, get your hormones checked. Brian, you're muted. I saw your mouth move. I wasn't sure if you're speaking for us. Oh, you're muted. No, I can't hear you.
Yeah, Brian, we can't hear you, buddy. Brian Kivett, were you talking? We can't hear you if you were. We still can't hear you. Sorry, you're on mute.
I was just talking to a friend.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to get anybody's attention.
So prioritize sleep. Do what it takes. Get a sleep study. There's a book called 62 Romeo or 100 and it's like called Sleep 101, I think is the other name of it. Sleep hygiene, although it's a terrible word, hygiene, it really should be sleep habits, and you can learn the sleep habits. There are cognitive behavioral programs for insomnia known as ICBT. You could probably find some of that right on YouTube. it's things like um, your bedroom should be quiet, silent, dark, cold. You should get morning sunlight on your eyes early in the morning when you get up. Um, Take magnesium an hour, 90 minutes before bed. Variety of different things. You can learn it, and I would encourage most people need it. Most college students need it, from what I can tell. The other thing, really important, um, to reduce the chronic and systemic inflammation in our bodies. This is like something that I think medicine really tuned into about 10, 15 years ago, but still not enough. But chronic inflammation in our bodies, that's referring to an immune response that we have in every cell in our body. Every single cell in our body can get this inflammation. And it's pretty much caused by modern lifestyles. So the way to reverse it and to reduce it is to live an ancient lifestyle, so to speak. Now, let me say a little bit more about what this chronic inflammation is. So if you cut yourself, if you get a simple little paper cut on your finger, it turns red, it swells up, it feels warm to the touch, it's inflamed. That inflammation is an immune response to help that cut heal. But we poison our bodies with modern lifestyle. And so for most of us, we have a chronic inflammatory immune response circulating through our body, trying to protect us from the fast food and the sugar and the tobacco and all the crap that we eat and the way we don't move our bodies and the sleep we don't get and all of that. This inflammation is a driver of all modern chronic diseases, including cancer, including diabetes and metabolic syndromes, autoimmune disorders, cardiac disorders. Even depression is caused by caused by inflammation in the body. And there are studies that show when you reduce inflammation in the body for somebody who's depressed, they become less depressed or they're not depressed at all. So what does an anti-inflammatory lifestyle look like? And this is the list. And you can buy books, you can find podcasts, you can go deep on this in a lot of different ways. But essentially, it's eat a whole food diet, get your protein, try to eliminate all soda, as much sugar as you can, added sugar, not referring to like natural sugars in fruits or milk, dairy products. But try to eliminate soda, fast food, junk food, sugars. Anything that's highly processed is going to add to your inflammation. When we look at a package of food and we look at the ingredients and we don't know what half the ingredients are and we can't pronounce them, that's a clue. We shouldn't eat that. Supplementation, omega-3s, vitamin Ds, turmeric, magnesium for sleep. There's some things we can do. I'm not necessarily a fan of the keto diet. I am a fan of intermittent fasting. I do it myself. And this can be really simple. Just eat your first meal a little later in the day and your last meal a little earlier in the day. Try to get a feeding window I strive for 8-16, 8-hour feeding window, 16-hour fast. I strive for that. I don't always make it. But even a 10-hour feeding window, even a consistent 12-hour feeding window, you're better. You're ahead of the game. It's those late night snacks, especially middle of the night snacking, that really crushes us. Alcohol and tobacco are inflammatories.
Amazingly inflammatory too. I quit drinking for a while, and I've kind of reintroduced some alcohol on the weekends. And guys, listen to this. I'm 4 to 6 pounds heavier on Monday if I have a drink over the weekends. Now
Wow.
it's not fat, but if I stop, it goes down after about 2 days. That's
Mhm.
how much excess fluid and how inflammatory that is in the body to me. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
it is amazing. I I used to wear a Whoop strap. I don't anymore, but I always noticed if I had two or more drinks in an evening, my recovery the next day was just hammered.
Yeah.
And in the analytics that they give you, you get like for every kind of thing you do or you log, you get you get analytics that tell you positive or negative what is contributing to your recovery scores. So for me, intermittent fasting was the number one positive thing for my recovery
Yeah.
scores, and alcohol was the number one worst thing.
I've learned that.
I wasn't using opiates or cocaine, so there's probably some worse things than alcohol,
Yeah, right.
but it's bad for us.
Very inflammatory.
Very inflammatory. Exercise is a good counterweight to inflammation. I am, guys, I'll say this. I'm a big proponent of variable resistance bands. Myself, in my late 50s, later 50s, I was having enormous amount of pain in my arms and shoulders and back. I did like 30 minutes a day of floor exercises, crunches, stretches, planks. But all those pull-ups I was doing, all those push-ups, I didn't even do large weights. I just did body weights, pull-ups, push-ups, squats with like with a weight vest and things like that. When I switched over and started using only resistance bands, all my pain went away after about 3 months. It all went away. Now, the system I use, it's called X3. You can find it online. It comes with a bar that's about shoulder length width that has hooks, and the bands are all round. They're all rubber bands. So you hook them on and you loop them over your back, or you have a plate that you stand on. So you can go, I go really heavy. Some of my bands are like that thick. I can't, the heavy band I actually can't go over too much with, but you can stay dangerous. You can stay in really good shape with a really tight fitness routine that does not put the stress on your joints like free weights do, because bands work with your strength curve instead of against it.
Hey, Chris, this is Steve Morgan again. I just want to jump in and back up what you're saying. Yeah, I read your book last year and just like, okay. So I went online and I ordered a set of X3. You've been using it for almost a year. Love it.
Nice.
Best piece of gear. And I don't know if it was in your book or what. I can travel with mine.
Yep.
You know,
Travel with mine.
It's a really good piece of gear, and it's about the only exercise gear that I've used for almost a year. And I've been faithful with it. And, the guys here, on my Thursday morning prayer meetings with John, I talk about the difference that it's made in my life at PT. So I'd recommend it to the guys on the panel here, everybody on. It's not cheap stuff, but it's worth every penny.
Thank you. It changed my life. I've been only using variable resistance bands for about 6 years now, 5 years now. It's all I do. I don't even do cardio anymore. I mean, I have some health issues that make cardio a problem, but just with variable resistance bands alone, I've actually bulked up on muscle. My midsection reduced. So I'm back to the same belt size I had in high school. And my resting overnight heart rate is in the 50s. And I'm in my early 60s, and that's without any cardio. So yeah. And living without pain is kind of nice, isn't it?
Amen. I also shared that link to the X3 system on in the chat here. I can email that too as well to everybody about.
The last thing I have on this list are just do something every day. Take a hot sauna bath or a cold plunge or meditate, journal, socialize. Something that you can use that makes you feel relaxed and good for just an hour or two, listening to music. There is really good research on hot sauna showing, and I mean randomized controlled medical trials showing that it reduces depression and it reduces inflammation. And so the mechanism by which it reduces depression is probably by reducing the inflammation. You know what the 10 happiest country, or you know what the happiest, if you look every year, they do a survey of the happiest nations in the world. And every year in the top 10, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Finland, they're all countries that use hot sauna as part of their daily cultural practices. Maybe it's a coincidence.
You're like Wim Hof for president.
Wim Hof.
Cold blends and sauna.
All right, we've talked about this. So what does treatment look like if you need treatment? This is what you're going to get from the VA. These are all reasonable things if they're delivered and provided in a competent, expert, appropriate manner. Problem with psychotherapy is it only addresses certain things, and not very many of our therapists in this country or anywhere are really culturally competent to work with warriors. Psychiatric medications can be really useful for some people. SSRIs are pretty safe. They're really not addictive. You could take them for decades at a time and maybe get a little bit of benefit from them. But too often, one medication becomes 3, then 6, then 8. You get up to a certain point, and then medications are being added to treat the side effects caused by the earlier medications. So it is a cocktail of 10 to 20 medications, as absurd as that sounds, is kind of normal. It's kind of normative for VA. When I worked at VA, I worked with 2 different psychiatrists in the clinic, not at the same time. The second psychiatrist was good. I liked working with him. I respected him. He didn't overprescribe. The first psychiatrist, the guy was prescribing mostly Valium. And he liked to tell everybody that he was aggressive in how he treated anxiety and PTSD. What he meant was he was giving guys 100 milligrams of Valium, so they were completely just doped up and unable to function. It was horrible. We actually got him out of the VA, but it took every MD in the department. It took all his colleague MDs to get him out. Okay, there's a lot of other good treatments, and so in some ways, maybe this is kind of the money slide. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger. So this is kind of A, B, and C are kind of my go-tos for everybody I talk to. If you haven't had a sleep study, get one now. B, if you haven't had your hormones evaluated, do that now. A stellate ganglion block, if you're suffering, if you're having insomnia, if you're struggling with anger, anxiety, a stellate ganglion block immediately will help to a very large degree. What is that? A stellate ganglion block is a simple outpatient procedure. It's safe. The side effects are short term. Your face will droop for a few hours and then that goes away. The effects are immediate. What is it? It's essentially injecting a little medicine into the sympathetic nervous system. The stellate ganglion is a component of the sympathetic nervous system. So it's medicating the fight or flight response. And yeah, they get it at around C6, C7. So they go in on the side and they inject the medicine into the stellate ganglion that runs down our spinal column. What guys describe the next day is they already feel different. They feel better. I often will get guys that I've persuaded to go do it. They'll call me that night or they'll call me the next morning and they'll be like, holy moly, this was amazing. I feel relaxed. I feel calm. I got a really good night's sleep. A week goes by and they'll call me back and go, it's still amazing. And my wife loves me again. She says, I'm suddenly not an asshole anymore. The anger is gone. The hypervigilance comes down. And so more present and involved with family. It's not a miracle cure. It doesn't last forever, but it will last for 3 to 6 months for most people. And then it gradually wears off. And if you're wondering, oh, I don't want to get a shot, I don't want to be medicated or doped up, that's not what this does. This actually turns down the physiological arousal within your sympathetic nervous system, which allows your mind to be clearer, to be more clear. So people report better short-term memory, much better concentration, much better attention. I also think of it as a sort of a way of opening the door to other therapeutics. So once you're sleeping better, once you're feeling more calm, you can get more out of your psychedelic medicine journey. You can get more out of your your regular psychotherapy. You can get more out of things like journaling and meditating. And because you're sleeping better, that brings a whole cascade of health and wellness benefits. And so you could go back and have it done again in 6 months. You could repeat this. You could repeat this multiple times over your life. I don't know of anybody that's had it more than 3 or 4 times because they say after by that time they're doing well enough, they never need to go back. I'll just go through this list and say a few short things about each of these
Question on that, if you don't mind, where do you get that? Is that, I mean, I'm assuming that's not a VA thing.
treatments. Well, the VA has a policy on it apparently that they don't approve it because they don't think it's effective enough. So they don't do it. There's really good randomized controlled trial data on it. And in fact, just to say a little bit more, the stellate ganglion block was first used in the 1920s. So it's been a standard part of neurology treatments for about 100 years now. Now, it's been used for cluster headaches and other types of headaches. And it was noticed about 15 years ago, two neurologists at Fort Bragg, one of whom, ironically, was a Navy SEAL before he was an MD. He was a SEAL in the 80s. They noticed as they were treating soldiers for their headaches that they were coming back for rechecks a few days later or a week later, and they were describing this pattern of calmness and relaxation and better sleep. So they kind of did their thinking and they were like, well, we are hitting the sympathetic nervous system. Maybe this makes sense. So those two neurologists did the randomized controlled trials looking at the effects on not just headaches, but on PTSD symptoms, anxiety symptoms, sleep. And now those guys and other people are studying it and finding not only does it reduce anxiety, but it also and improve sleep, but it also seems to stimulate neurogenerativity, meaning it helps the brain heal itself, resprouting new dendrites, new neurons coming online, new pathways and connections of existing neurons. So stellate ganglion block treatment, in my mind, should be at the very top of the list for every operator. I do know guys that have gotten it through VA, but they've gotten it by going through pain clinics. And so that is one place to look for it in the civilian world, is to look at pain clinics. The people who provide it aren't psychiatrists. Psychiatrists don't have the training. Most psychologists have never heard of this because it's a neurology treatment. So again, the fragmentation of these specialties just makes us stupid. Pain clinic. The other place to look are the Stella centers.
Yeah, real quick, Mike, I don't know where you're at. I'm still, unfortunately, here around Camp Lejeune, but I got about 4 rounds done through the pain management clinic here at Naval. Now, it was kind of ironically, it was through a psychiatrist through the VA, like the one and only dude I actually liked and trusted. Made a call over there because I was already retired. They were able to kind of get me in the back door, and I eventually did like 4 different shots. But Naval Hospital on Lejeune does it case by case if you're retired. But I don't know if you said are you here or are you down in Florida?
Yeah, I'm in Tampa still. I'll have to
Okay.
look into the VA around here. I'm sure they've heard of it. I've never tried to get it done. So
Yeah,
first
Mike,
time really.
I would consult Brett Hockey, Dr. Brett Hockey on that too. Yeah, he'll probably have resources for you.
There's a national franchise called Stella Centers, and I don't like to be the advertisement for franchises or things like this, except that they're really good and they're all over. I think there's 50 of them around the country now. They have a unified protocol. So they use stellate ganglion block and they use ketamine infusion, which I'm about to talk about next. and they do them together. And their protocol comes from Dr. Lipoff, Gene Lipoff, who's a anesthesiologist in Chicago. And I've done a little work with him. I believe he's really good. I know dozens of guys that have gone to his program and have had great success. And so he's worked with this private company that's built these centers. And this is what they do. They treat first responders and soldiers, as well as many other people, but it's using stellate ganglion blocks. So this is a place you can go. Ketamine infusion. Ketamine is you guys probably know, it can be a battlefield medication. It's widely used in emergency room anesthesia as part of a cocktail. It's often combined with fentanyl. But ketamine is a mild hallucinogen. About 10 years ago, it was approved as a treatment for severe depression that has not gotten better from other kind of treatments. So treatment-resistant depression is what ketamine has been approved for. Now, I don't like the nasal spray approaches. I don't like the idea of giving folks tablets that they use at home on their own. I am a big fan, though, of the infusions. So one session of ketamine infusion is this. You go to the center, you sit in a comfortable chair, you relax, you close your eyes. Maybe they put eye shades on you and they put a needle into your arm and they drip the ketamine into your system that way. They do that for about an hour and then they remove the needle and you sit there for another hour or so until your head is clear enough and then you go home. That's one session. We're seeing really good effects from 4 sessions, 6 sessions, 8 sessions is kind of the max. I mentioned Lipoff earlier, he and I have a paper that we've written about this. What he does is he does these 2 treatments together in the same week. So he'll do 4 ketamine infusions Monday to Friday. And then on the day he doesn't do a ketamine infusion, he'll do the stellate ganglion block. We think that ketamine infusions also stimulate neurogenerativity, so brain health. And we think that doing stellate and ketamine, and this was what our paper was about, and it's theoretical, it's theoretical with a case study. But what we think is these 2 treatments, if they're done in the same month, that they actually are synergistic with each other, that they amplify the benefits of each one. So it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 10, or maybe 5. Vestibular therapy is like physical therapy for your ear. If you have disequilibrium, if you're clumsy, if your balance is off in any way, if you have vertigo symptoms of being dizzy and nauseous and off balance at the same time, look into vestibular therapies. They're non-invasive, no medication, no needles, no medical procedure. It's literally like going to see a physical therapist who does different stretches and movements with you. What the an example of what they might do is they might put you in a chair that rotates in 3 dimensions. So they strap you into a reclining chair that turns you on its side, moves you around, moves you back. What it's doing is it's reorienting the little particles, the little crystals that can become detached within our inner ears. So it's working at that level. Transcranial magnetic stimulation is another.
Sorry to interrupt, Chris. I'm going to post, somebody from our volunteer team here at Hooks sent me a link that I will post as well in the chat here. So that's what that is. If you guys see that posted. Sorry.
And what's it a link to?
SGB, it's stellamentalhealth.com.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a resource here in Southern Florida.
Okay.
And that's all I know about them thus far. But I trust the source.
Are most of you in Florida? Or spread all over?
Spread all around. Yeah, spread all around.
Well, for those of you in Tampa, I'm a USF graduate. I got my PhD at
There you go. A homeboy.
Boy, a long time ago. That was before they were murdering graduate students there. All right, transcranial magnetic stimulation. This is a form of brain stimulation that is not, there's no shock involved. It's usually 30 sessions, 20 minutes a session. And they position a coil right next to your head. And that coil emits very low dose, light magnetic pulses. And the pulses, we call it transcranial because the pulses go from one side to the other and they kind of bounce back and forth. This is an effective treatment for depression. It's FDA approved for that. And now we're looking at it. I just was part of a paper we published last year in operators receiving this treatment known as magnetic electronic resonance therapy, or MERT. Anybody received MERT treatment? Curious? It's TMS, but it has another element to it. So I'll check out this clinic. Before they do the TMS itself, they administer an EEG test and readings, so that they can guide they can be more precise with the location and the frequency of the pulses of the electronic signals. By the way, I think this is a Stella Center.
Oh, okay.
The link you posted.
Okay.
I think it's one of the Stella centers. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird. It's weird to think that there's a franchise that actually, we think of
Specializes in it.
that actually does the best stuff.
Yeah.
McDonald's is not going to compete with a Michelin-starred restaurant typically, but here you may get better care at a Stella Center than you get at a at a Michelin-starred hospital, or the equivalent of.
I know so many guys who've had such good success with that have run through our program. They've sworn by it.
Through that exact clinic, or
No, just through the process itself, through the treatment.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, it's a really good treatment. Other things, I am a fan of psychedelics, although we don't know very much yet. There's hope that not only are they great treatments for depression, anxiety, existential crises, substance abuse, but also they may actually help heal the brain too. They may stimulate. So some of the research that's happening right now is looking at how psychedelics affect the neurobiology of the human brain. We're a long ways from that, from knowing those answers. But just anecdotally, and from what I've read in the scientific literature, I think there's a lot of hope for ibogaine and 5-MeO-DMT. Psilocybin seems to be pretty good too. So, I think several of, at least one of you already mentioned a psychedelic journey. The benefits seem to be very real. What I would say is it's not the psychedelic, it's not the weekend itself that brings all the benefits. That's just part of it. You got to do the prep work ahead of time, and you got to do the ongoing work afterwards. And sometimes the word that's used is integration. Which I don't know what that means, really. I don't know that anybody does. But what I would say is start getting right before you go. Get your hormones, your hormones dialed in first. Get that sleep study done. Maybe get a stellate ganglion block. Spend time. If you know you're going in a month or 6 weeks, use that time. Try to stop drinking. Try to start sleeping better. Try to start meditating. Maybe go to psychotherapy. Maybe journal. Put something in where you're really putting conscious thought into your own wellness and health journey, and then continue that afterwards. Pause. I heard somebody comment.
I was just going to say, Chris, so I did that. I went through an organization for ibogaine and 5-MeO. And just like you said, the good thing about it, there's a lot of different folks that are offering it. I think some are better than others, but the one I went through was very good. It's all about, like you said, you got to quit the drinking, you got to get your stuff right. But the intention of what you're going down there for, doing a lot of the pre-work that they make you go through before you go down there. And then after, the integration is huge. So I'd still meet weekly with a group of other soft dudes and stuff that have been down there and done it. And it's a really good process, and they stay with you for a long time after. And those were that was kind of the thing that I'll tell you up front that got me off the ledge. I went down in kind of a crisis mode, but this was over a year ago, and it basically kind of saved my life, for lack of a better word. So I'm a big proponent of it. But yeah, there's a lot of pre-work and post-work that you have to stay up on, but it's very beneficial. And thankfully, there's a lot of states. And I think now, the president has just kind of signed to kind of start kickstarting more of the research into it. And it's coming more, hopefully, mainline. I just hope that Big Pharma doesn't get involved, because I'm sure they'll probably screw it up somehow. But yeah,
I don't think Big Pharma is going to be able to take it over.
I hope not.
If it is already being produced and made, and a lot of it is naturalistic. It's not all, it's not synthetic. What program did you go? What did you use?
So I went through Vets, Marcus Capone and them. Very good organization. And the way they do it, like I said, pre, during, and post, very professional and very, very integrated. And, it's top notch, I thought.
I was an advisor to them for several years.
Okay.
There's the Mission Within. There's also Heroic Hearts.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a number. There's probably many others that I don't even know of. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy. This is an interesting one. A few years ago, 10 years ago, we thought, if you went to the literature to say, does hyperbaric oxygen therapy help with TBI or PTSD? The answer would have been nope, doesn't seem to. There were 2 clinical trials, neither one found good results. So a lot of the medical society just put it aside. There are grassroots efforts saying, wait a minute, this actually, if you do it differently and you do it right and you do it well, there are benefits. I think we don't fully understand or know whether this is the treatment that people should be getting. I know a handful of guys that have described HBOT as transforming their life. I know one guy, and he's a former PJ, and he's also pretty wealthy. He's a serial entrepreneur, but he bought a $15,000 chamber for himself that's in his basement. And it's not a hard shell, it's a soft shell chamber. And he said he sits in there for about 2 hours every day. He'll take a nap in there, he'll bring his laptop or a book, he'll work in there. And he said he's told me it's been transformative for him. And he's got a very analytic mind, so I have a fair amount of faith in his using himself as a single case study, that he's actually controlled for it. But I'll also I'll also tell you this. In Israel, the Israelis have published now in the last 4 years, they've published a series of really tight studies showing benefits for HBOT therapy for PTSD, anxiety. So there are clinics in Israel now that are using it exclusively for soldiers and even civilians, and civilians affected by terrorism. And one of the things that's different, like, well, why would the Israeli studies be different from the US studies? Well, they have a different protocol. And this is part of the challenge for a lot of this stuff is, what's the proper dose? What's the right dose? What they do, it's not 40 sessions, it's 60. So it's more sessions, and it's a different level of pressure that they use. Functional medicine. I think there's a lot of hope for functional medicine programs that look at things like stem cells, peptides. I'm going to take this off, actually, because I think I no longer believe in NAD plus infusions. Nutritional approaches, dietary supplements, natural compounds. So there are things happening. Oops, what happened there? There we go. There are things happening in that space that I think are really interesting, and a number of really good clinics in the Florida Panhandle, San Diego. There's one in Kansas City that I like. They're hard to judge. They're hard to assess from the outside, so it can be hard to know. Speech pathology. This is a field that actually helps people with TBI learn how to think better and think more clearly and organize and stay organized. So they're like tutors. It's kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy from somebody who really is actually an expert on how to think better and to think more clearly. And if you're wondering, well, what does that have to do with speech? Language and thought are, tightly connected to each other. Last thing I'll say, I am a huge fan of peer coaching programs. And the reason is sort of because we talked about other people aren't culturally competent. The people who come through an MD program, a PhD program, aren't going to be as competent. So programs like the SEAL Future Foundation, Boulder Crest is a really good one. These are programs that may have an MD or a PhD as an advisor, but not as the contact. So with SEAL Future Foundation, I don't talk to SEALs myself. I'm not in the pipeline. SEAL calls, they talk to another SEAL, peer to peer, who's been educated, who's learned. Most of them are actually combat medics themselves now, or former combat medics. And they're using all the things on this treatment, all the things on this list, and probably more. So if a SEAL calls SFF, they talk to a SEAL who will walk them through a lot of what I'm walking you guys through, and then they'll make decisions like, oh, let's go get these things done. Sharp performance. I'll just mention this. If anybody wants a job, I think Sharp is probably hiring coaches. It's a new tech startup, started just last year, or a year and a half ago. The concept is former operators who are providing one-to-one coaching to first responders and potentially other military units if we can get those contracts. But they've signed, for example, they've signed the Tampa Police Department. Every police officer in Tampa is going to have access. So it's like an annual subscription. Every police officer in Tampa has access to the Sharp Performance coaches, so they can book one-on-one coaching sessions and they can choose their coach from a roster. And they have access to a lot of the educational materials and other toolkit things that they've got on their app. But at heart, it's a really simple concept. It's somebody who's been there, done that, lived it, and had their own health journey, helping be a coach or a mentor for a younger person who's still active in the career. And they're using the operator syndrome framework with that. I'll just finish this up and then we can see about questions. So there are some other things you can read. There's not a lot out there. The SEAL Future Foundation did create a health index. So this is kind of like an encyclopedia of stuff for operators. Anybody can use it. It's public access. You could just go to the SEAL Future Foundation's website and go to their health index. And there's just lot of little short blog like articles and things on things. And then there's my book. By the way, I'm kind of excited about this. Somebody from Ukraine reached out to me about 6 weeks ago. And so now there's a Ukrainian publisher. So I've got a contract
Good
for
for
them.
you. That's awesome.
Yeah, they're going to they've already done the translation and they hope to get it published in Ukraine by the end of this year, by the fall.
That's great.
Yeah.
And guys, anybody on this call who needs a copy of this book, Hooks of Hope will buy you one. So if you don't have a copy and you need it, just send me an email, shoot me a text, and we'll get you one.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And wrapping up here, I just want to say, I've talked about a bunch of, unpleasant stuff, but I want to leave everybody with the message of hope. I know so many guys that have turned their lives around and are really living and thriving today with their wife and their kids and their careers. Who would tell you it didn't look like that was going to happen for them at an earlier point? So there absolutely is hope. And if we go back to that list of treatments, I don't know that there's one treatment on there that we could predict is going to be the one for you. You may have to try several of them. You may get the stellate ganglion. It might be wonderful for a month, and then it may fade, and you might be going, okay, now what? Go back and get a ketamine infusion. Consider getting psychedelic journey. Consider, are your hormones doing well? Stay on top of that. And then, of course, just thank you. Thank you for having me. That's
Chris,
it.
thank you so much for, I mean, just not just for your work in this community. You really you've opened the eyes of so many and opened the ears of so many that it's really changed the game. I hear it all the time when I'm talking to veterans. Hey, have you read Operator Syndrome? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, your work is having a meaningful impact on this community. It's saving lives. So it's real stuff, man. And thank you for doing it.
Thank you for saying all that. It's, I went to graduate school because I wanted to help veterans. That was my goal when I started school. My dad's
Yeah.
was a Vietnam veteran, a physician, not a combatant. And my great grandfather, who I knew when I was a kid, he fought at Battle of San Juan Hill in Cuba in 1898, and he lived to be almost 100. So
Wow.
I think I was 14 when he passed, but he was very influential on me and my future ever since.
You're doing great things. I'll leave it up to questions for anybody here on the call. I know we covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah, I got a question for Chris. Um, you're, you and your compatriots are doing a lot of great work. And, I heard you say, the VA doesn't like you. What do you have any kind of sense of what the military, I think all of us almost are military related, what the military leadership is doing? Because my thing is that the leadership is morally corrupt. And if they would do a better job of paying attention to what you say and guys like you, going all the way back to John Shea and his book Achilles in Vietnam, which is on the commandant's reading list. But I just wonder if the people that are, in charge are paying attention to guys like you. Do you have a sense that they are? Because I certainly don't. I think they're morally corrupt and just,
Well,
fairly long career. And my worst thing, the thing that I've talked more to my counselor about than anything, is the moral injury that was caused by leadership cowardice. And is that, do you get any positive feedback on that? Is there a change somewhere, or what?
I'm going to give you, I don't have a clear sense of the answer. So I've never worked for the Department of War. I did one contract for the US Navy in 1999 prior to 9/11. I worked in VA, but I left in 2006. So since I've been working with operators, it's been entirely 100% outside the VA and entirely outside the Department of War. So I've never been funded by either one of these groups to do what I've been doing. I've never been encouraged. Of course, they don't have the capability of stopping me either. One of the things that I think has been on my side, if you will, is because I wasn't in uniform, because I wasn't part of any military command structure, guys have been willing to talk to me over the years. And my promise to them is I don't keep notes. I don't write things down. I will help you pro bono. By the way, I don't do any one-on-one work really much anymore, but most of my work has been pro bono to individuals. And so guys could talk to me because I wasn't going to call anybody at the Pentagon. I wasn't going to report anything to an officer up the chain of command. And so what I think happened in 2020 came out of nowhere as far as VA or Department of Defense was concerned. They didn't know who I was, who's this guy, what is this about? And yet I've got name. If you in my book, you'll see the name. Probably each of you will recognize at least one name in there, I would guess. There's probably 40 different operators who are in there, which actually makes me somewhat bulletproof from their criticisms because it isn't really me, it's all these other voices that I'm just representing, the voices of many other folks. I did hear whispers that SOCOM did not like me, did not like my ideas in 2020 and 21. On the other hand, I got an email from General Petraeus in 20 saying, congratulating me on the paper, saying this was fine work and important work. I mean, I don't know that it was just a nice email that I got from him. On the other hand, I have also heard from people who've said, yeah, flag officers at SOCOM hate this concept. They don't like it. I've had one very direct interaction with a I guess first he was a 2-star at Warcom, admiral at Warcom, and then he was a 3-star admiral at SOCOM, and then he retired a couple years ago. And I've had interactions with him, and he's been very clear and publicly clear in front of a room full of people that I mean, he stood up and he said essentially this: I haven't read your book, but I think your ideas are very dangerous. And he was mad. He was raging at me. He basically told me to stay in my lane and go away and leave it to the Harvard folks and the military folks to figure things out. But that old guard they're retiring now. They're leaving. And so General Fenton, for example, who I think he's retired now probably. And I don't know him. I think I shook his hand once. I'm not saying I don't want to say I know him, but I do know from other people that they perceived him as being open to things related to operator syndrome. Last fall, it was probably October, I got a text from a guy who I won't say his name. You might have heard of him, probably not, but he's a special advisor to Pete Hegseth, and he's an attorney. And he was formerly, I think, a Marine JAG, and now he went into private, and then he's back, I think, maybe on a reserve status. But he's a special advisor to Secretary Hegseth. And what he told me in his text was, "Hey, read this memo." So he attached a memo, and the memo was a 4-page document written to Hegseth, Secretary Hegseth, and it was basically saying, it was a memo saying we need to incorporate operator syndrome into our official doctrine from the top of our military, and implications for that. And he laid out the implications very, very specifically for changing things that we do for sleep, soldiers' sleep, and changing our approaches to managing soldiers' hormones. And he told me that Secretary Hegseth was very receptive and very interested and very supportive of the idea. But he also said there's a lot of people around here who are not supportive at all. And so there's both enthusiastic supporters and strong opposition as well. From the perspective of the VA, they have a very strong industry. It's a massive industry. The PTSD industry is huge. Those folks do not want to be disrupted. They don't want somebody coming along and saying, hey, guess what? It's not PTSD. You guys have missed the boat for 50 years. If we help veterans with pain and brain health and hormones and sleep, what you're calling PTSD disappears. It goes away. It's not really the problem. And by the way, I'm not saying PTSD isn't part of the problem. It's just not the only problem or the main problem. That's my perspective.
Mind, body, spirit. They all must be right in order to be well.
There was an FDA panel in December, chaired by Dr. Macri, who's the current head of the FDA, And the purpose of this panel was to discuss rescheduling of testosterone therapy for men in order to make it easier for men to get testosterone therapy. Now, this was not a military thing. It was just a general thing. He had, I don't know how many, but I'm gonna guess it was about 8 experts. Each expert got like a 10-minute opportunity to talk. One of the slots went to the U.S. Army Surgeon General. She didn't present herself, but she appointed one of her, she appointed an andrologist in uniform, a guy who's at the rank of major, and he's a doc at one of the Army Special Forces groups. And so she tasked him with presenting on behalf of the Army, and she told him use and start with the operator syndrome framework as a foundational reason for why we're concerned about hormones. And then lead into healthy hormones are important for fitness and performance in the military. So critically important. And so this guy, this andrologist, did reach out to me ahead of time. We had a meeting, we talked, and then he went and did it. You can find that it's probably still on YouTube. I'm sure it's still on YouTube. YouTube is forever, I think. So there are discussions happening, but where are they going and who's driving them? It's not me. I'm not in any particular, I have no influence, no bureaucratic power or empire or influence. There are people doing research now. There's a Palo Alto has a polytrauma center for the VA. So the VA has 5 national polytrauma centers. One is at Palo Alto, which is Stanford, and they have built their program using operator syndrome, and they're collecting data in all of these domains. And so in November, they completed a project they've been working on for about 2 years that is an empirical validation of operator syndrome. And it's a really tight methodological paper. I will be a co-author on it. We haven't been able to get it published. Nobody wants it. I shouldn't say it that way. The Journal of Traumatic Stress, which is the VA's PTSD industry, folks. My colleague submitted it there. I said, don't bother, but he did anyway. They sent it right back to him the very next day and said, no, thank you. We're not even going to send this out for review because special operators are such a small, tiny niche group. Our readers aren't interested. We sent it to military medical research. They sent it back the next day also without sending it out for review. And the editor said, this is actually a really, really very rigorous methodological study. Kudos. However, such a small group, it's just not important enough to rise to the level of the kind of research we're interested in.
Ultra high risk group.
Well, a small niche, not risk, niche, a small niche. That was their way of saying it's just not important enough. We don't care.
Yeah, I guess my point is we're losing guys every day from
Right.
the community, right?
Right. And we're sending more guys into harm's way without getting this right. Yeah.
It's terrible.
Well, folks, I probably need to bounce over and check in on my wife, and maybe even see what the Celtics are doing.
Chris, thank you so much. Every time you speak at these things, it's profound. And again, thank you for your work and for supporting us and helping our guys. Yeah.
Well, thank you for what you're doing. Proud to wear my hat.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And
Can you email me? Can you make some changes to that presentation? I'm going to distribute. I have your presentation, but I wasn't tracking your changes along, the one that I have.
okay, I can send it to you, but I didn't really make that many. I just highlighted a few things as we're going.
Okay. So I can, if you send that to me, I'll distribute it to everybody on the call.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, thanks for showing up on a Saturday afternoon/evening.
Thank you very much, Chris. And I'll be in touch with you regarding you mentioned there was 4 functional medicine clinics, and I'd like to get that from you, and if you don't have any problem, disseminate to the group that's on here.
Yeah.
And the one thing I would add to what you're saying is it's important to have the knowledge. It's important to understand, the problem, some solutions. But the most important thing is for guys to actively make that investment and take the initiative to, like Cody had said, hey, I've done this and this, and it's helping. But a lot of guys, they just hear this and, they don't move forward. And you have to
Right.
make that investment in your time and initiative to get healed, or people are going to walk around forever with a diminished vitality. They're not going to be as full as God intended them to be. And that's not what we want. So I just really encourage everybody to get the information more completely, like you have in your book. We'll put I'll get this information from you and send it out to our groups that have attended as far as some of these functional medicine clinics. But I told Dr. Brett Hockey and John Lesnick before we had our first course that I don't want to be a part of or recommend anything to anybody that I haven't tried. So, had the labs done, and Brett did some stem cell on me, but it's important for guys to take that kind of initiative. I'm not saying they have to try everything, but when they have problems, they have to work on getting it solved. So, but I really appreciate doing this on a short notice on the weekend. Glad we had this kind of turnout, help these guys, and it's important for the guys to push that information forward to their networks as well.
Yeah, right on. Well, thank you. I'm honored to have been able to spend a couple hours with you guys.
Yes, very much
Thank you.
appreciated,
Take the
Chris.
same mindset you applied to your career in the military and apply it to your life now. Never quit. Be smart. Find the right people. Keep pushing.
I always try and spread the word. Honest with you, Chris, I've recommended your book to I don't know how many people. And John and Fred with this organization, having you on here is awesome. So thank all of y'all.
Love doing
Appreciate
it.
that
Yep.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all
Thank you.
very much. Appreciate it.
Here,
Yep.
buddy.
Have a great Saturday.